Great, thank you so much. Hello everybody, welcome. It's great to have a very small but powerful group here. As mentioned, I'm Anthony, the CEO of Aragon. Aragon's been building DAO technology since 2017, and actually have been part of the Swiss community since early 2018. We have several different tech stacks that have helped DAOs govern themselves on chain. We have over $40 billion in TVL. And last year, we launched a new tech stack, taking all the learnings that we extrapolated from the last 5-ish years to really create something new that would be very future and forward-looking and support DAOs and moving forward because of some of the issues we had seen. So I'll be talking specifically about DAO modularity, governance modularity, this new tech stack, and how that's going to help this next generation of DAOs from learnings from the past. So let's talk a little bit about the state of governance today, especially in relation to DAO tooling. Cue the burning room. I like to include some memes to keep things light and fun. So we always hear this DAOs don't work sort of statement, which doesn't really make too much sense, but one of the things that is a problem is they have a lack of reliable, secure governance tooling. Their options don't fit the needs and what they're looking for. They're very cookie cutter right now, which I'll explain in a second. And members don't care enough to participate. We have a huge amount of voter apathy. We don't have a lot of voters that are actually participating for various reasons. And so what we need is to try and get beyond this scope. So as I said, organizations aren't cookie cutter. So why is there governance? Protocols with cookie-cutter governance experience problems, obviously, and it holds them back from decentralizing, from moving forward. As you can imagine, if you only have a few types of governance methodologies that technologically exist on chain in the ecosystem, it's pretty hard to move beyond those to ideate new ways for DAOs to become successful. So what we end up having is a lot of DAOs have the exact same model. That can be just, most of them are just token-weighted voting, for example. So DAOs have different needs. They're obviously trying to reach different goals. Not all DAOs have the same goals, and so we need to create flexibility for these DAOs to be able to build how they want to reach their goals. Just like if it's nation states, for example, businesses, community clubs, like all these different organizations around the world don't have the exact same structure. Why? Because they have different goals. So one way to get around that, which we've seen in the space, is custom governance builds. Think of the Aves, the makers. They're able to, because they have a ton of resources, they're able to simply spend a lot of money, spend a lot of time, get a lot of developers in the room, and build custom governance, what they need, right? But not everybody can do that. It's time-consuming, it's resource-intensive, you need developers, and often it's monolithic. It's not easy for another organization to take this and grow it out for their own organization. Aragon does provide custom governance builds for organizations, but how can we take that and make it more accessible to other DAOs around the world? So, build a modular stack. We hear a lot about modularity at the infrastructure level, blockchains being modular. Celestia is a great example, is really the big one right now talking about modularity. But we're starting to see modularity up into the DeFi level, and now we're building something for DAOs in the DAO level. Morpho is a great example of a protocol that's building modular, and Aragon's now building a DAO stack that's also modular. So what does that look like? So Bitcoin might not fix this, but our new protocol, Aragon OSX, does. So it's a new generation DAO framework, and as you can see here, we've actually separated a lot of the governance and other types of logic for your DAO from the DAO contract and the permission manager itself. So the DAO vault itself is simple and secure, and the DAO actually manages permissions to these plugins. And a lot of the customized logic that you may need for your DAO is actually built into these plugins. And I'll explain that a little bit more forward. Look at them as plugins as a way to install different types of governance, for example. And when your DAO wants to involve in governance, you're able to unplug or detach one of these plugins and plug in a new one. And so for the first time with on-chain governance, you're actually able to change your governance on the fly and you can start to have a DAO that can evolve and adapt over time. Previously, you would have to either rebuild your DAO, fork another DAO, and this creates potential security problems. And so this makes it a lot easier. It makes it a lot faster and more secure, which I'll mention in a second. So obviously an example would be you could start your DAO with a multi-sig. You have off-chain voting, you have a multi-sig, it's trusted. Some people would not even call this a DAO. But then you decide, okay, I'm going to now upgrade my DAO to have token-weighted voting. You launch your token, you put up a proposal within that multi-sig, and you're able to uninstall a plugin and install a new plugin, which is token-weighted voting. So now your token holders are able to vote. Let's say in 10 years, and one of the issues in our space right now is we don't really have a lot of data of what a DAO is going to look like in 10 years. There is no DAO, unless you consider Bitcoin a DAO, that is more than 10 years old, right? So everything's quite young and new. But in 10 years, you may not want token-weighted voting anymore. Maybe now you want to change to one person, one vote. Okay? So then you uninstall, and you can change to one person, one vote. So this avoids, the great thing about this is it avoids trusted intermediaries. And DAOs right now are too heavily reliant on these trusted intermediaries to propose actions, proposals, to actually execute on these actions. And so that's one of the fixes that it does. So the plugin model is, first of all, it's a lot safer, it's easier, and most importantly, it's faster. And right now, we working with a lot of DAOs, it can take multiple years to actually launch a large DAO. Multiple years of building your community, multiple years of working on the legal aspect, the tax aspects, and then you have to build the DAO. And that build can take sometimes as long as 6 months in and of itself. So by reducing the time it takes to launch these DAOs, the cost, of course, and increasing security, you're starting to allow for this technology to flourish and allow for organizations who don't have all these resources to do the same thing as DAOs with resources. So let's go over some examples now, because it's like, okay, great, there are these plugins, right, from a technological perspective, like you can uninstall them, install them, that's great, but okay, let's look at some examples. And Ben actually sort of showcased what some examples could be, funny enough. And so let's take a look. So the first one could be multi-chain governance. We're starting to get into a very fragmented world in the crypto space where people have assets across different chains. And now what does that mean is that governance may exist across different chains. So Statter Labs, for example, their tokens located on 5 different chains. Well, okay, how do they actually then vote on chain if all of these tokens are across different chains? Well, you can install a multi-chain governance plugin, and we've already built this. You can then basically create a custom census where you can pull tokens from different chains, comprise that voting power together, and then your token holders can vote. And guess what? Your DAO is still going to live on your layer 1. So your DAO can still live on Ethereum, where it can have the maximum amount of security and liquidity, but you can have tokens across different chains and still get your voting power. And the great thing about this is now you can start reducing voter costs. One of the biggest issues we have is that people don't want to participate because on-chain they're going to have to spend anywhere from $5 to $30 to vote. And how many of you here, if you're asked to vote weekly, are going to actually want to spend that much money to vote on a proposal, right? So here you actually have voters getting voter costs on a layer 2, which could be a couple cents. On Polygon, it's probably 1 cent. But then actually have your DAO living on an L1. And then you can execute this payload onto the L1. So now we're starting to, again, allow for DAOs to be living across different chains, different ecosystems, and still be able to keep all that voting power on-chain, removing trusted intermediaries. So the second, what Ben mentioned, is a topic of conversation right now, is multi-body governance, bicameral systems. Granular permissions means we can separate groups with different governance permissions, and they can exist in one DAO. A cool example. So let's use Lido as an example. Lido probably right now, somebody asked if there's a DAO who has multiple tokens and can make decisions in one DAO. That's pretty rare, but actually Lido have announced that they're launching exactly this. So basically Lido has their LDO token, that's the token of their DAO, and when they have proposals, the Lido community, whoever holds LDO, can vote on this proposal. Now, the problem with this for Lido was that actually yes, LDO holders are very important, but their user are staked ETH holders. And there's over $40 billion worth of staked ETH holders. Now, how does LDO token holders, which could be comprised of a market cap of a couple hundred million, make decisions for the 40 billion? Okay, so they're adding in a system which will allow staked ETH holders to actually veto an LDO token holder vote if it compromises staked ETH itself. Now, this is going to open up other questions for LDO holders, of course, and like what is the purpose of that token, etc. But they're trying to keep it a bit separate. But at the same time, yes, staked ETH holders will now be the power holders in votes. And so now you have multi-body governance system, 2 tokens, 1 DAO. And this can start to change. You can even have a multi-sig. We're working on 1 DAO right now where the multi-sig is the core team will be able to create protocol upgrades or move a treasury amount from the multi-sig optimistically. If after 7 days nobody vetoes from the token holder community, then that proposal will automatically execute, right? But this now allows for them to work optimistically, but then you have this group of token holders who don't have to vote every day. They can simply look at the vote itself and say, this is totally fine. The team's doing what they want to do. Leave them alone. Not going to veto. Let it pass. If they see a malicious proposal one day, they can say, oh, no. We're not going to allow for this. We're going to veto it. But then you can even add another layer on top of that. You can add a layer where in this same multi-sig, if a majority or a maximum majority is reached, so a 10 out of 13 on the multi-sig, then it's going to actually pass through token holders for an emergency proposal and will upgrade the protocol. Okay, so now the power holder is still the multi-sig, but only an emergency situation. So you have 3 layers of governance happening there. So this is the type of customizability you can create with a modular stack, which you cannot create on a monolithic stack, at least not easily or securely. So optimistic dual governance, this has been by far the most popular sort of feature and request that DAOs around the space have come to us to build. It's relatively new, but we have over $1.5 billion worth of TVL building actively on this stack right now. We obviously can't announce who they are yet, but coming soon, which is really exciting. So another really cool thing about this plugin system and this modular stack is now you can finally have network effects, right? Once a plugin has been created, it is reusable by any other DAO through the Aragon plugin repository. This creates network effects, right? So this, you could end up having what's called like a marketplace for governance. And the great thing about this is previously, if you have a cool monolithic DAO, the Aave DAO, for example, if you wanted to have the exact same type of on-chain governance build that they have, you would actually have to fork the entire code. You would have to then somehow manage to fix it to work within the parameters of your DAO. And that can open up security risks. I mean, that's not that easy to do. It's not so easy to just fork a DAO like that and then it automatically works for your DAO. No, it's quite tailored to their governance. Right? And so the great thing about network effects is now, for the first time, if a plugin is built, so a governance type, methodology, etc., and audited, any other DAO that wants to use it can simply actually go into the Aragon plugin repository and plug that plugin in and start using it. And so this means it's a lot faster and cheaper for smaller DAOs who may not be able to afford to build their own plugin or have it audited. Now they can access that exact type of governance, plug it into their DAO, and start moving forward. And this is really has the potential to democratize access to governance tooling around the industry. Like this could be really, really big. In 10 years, you could have thousands of plugins built, all different types of custom governance types. And it doesn't just have to be custom governance. You know, it could be tokenomic models that are included into the governance. And people can simply take that and install it in their DAO and start running with it. So this could really, really open up a next wave of DAOs that have the ability to customize themselves and change over time. So it makes it safer, again, faster, and it also reduces liability. Whenever you can remove trusted components, you can, to some degree, reduce liability. A lot of teams come to us, like, let's be frank, and that's what they're worried about. Why are they building a DAO? It's not just to have a community. It's often because they are building a huge protocol, for example. They want it to be resilient, capture resistant. I typically use Lido as a great example because I feel like they're just so far ahead in terms of they're looking at not being captured by a regulator, right? They have 40 billion in TVL. You know, let's be honest, like the Ethereum itself is quite reliant on Lido right now. that might not be the best thing, but it is what it is. And they're great stewards of the Ethereum ecosystem, but they cannot afford to be taken over by a bad actor or by a regulator. So what are they after? They're after resilience. So what does future-proof governance add up to? It means that you're able to adapt and change over time. A lot of DAOs have not been able to do this. A lot of them are stuck in old technology that may still be very, very powerful, but that is extremely hard to upgrade or change as their DAO evolves. And this is really concerning. No organization in the world, no country or nation state in the world is stuck, or hopefully not at least, is unable to change. And that's what's happening to many of these DAOs, because only now are we starting to see these DAOs come to an age of maturity where maybe they do need to change. I think we have to be very, very realistic of that as an industry. We often want to move way too fast. We expect that DAOs and their governance systems and their communities are going to pop up and automatically start working very well and be extremely decentralized. But that's just not the reality. Communities take time to build, products take time to build, resilience takes time to build. And thus you need a DAO tooling stack that allows you to actually grow over time. And this is what underpins a truly resilient DAO. So modern problems require modern solutions. Yeah, so I think that's really it. I mean, the important part is that DAO tooling is going to continue to grow and adapt with the industry. There's not too many players actually working on this. We're very proud to be working on this. And we want to ensure that your DAOs, however you envision them growing over time and progressively decentralizing, that you're able to do that. So of course, if you have any questions, if you want to talk shop, if you have a DAO that you think needs to change or be fully on chain, whatever that might be, come speak to us. I have some great teammates here as well, some of whom are smart contract developers, UX professionals, front-end developers, and we're here to answer any questions. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Anthony. We have time for questions. I can see already.
Today, your teammate.
Thanks for the very interesting presentation. I think it's absolutely fantastic and absolutely needed that DAOs have all these possibilities to create these organizations and to create these governance models. I'm just wondering, because now with all these opportunities or possibilities in the future, and I know you're providing the technology, I see also more challenges maybe for DAOs to think about sensible organizational designs, for example. So out of your experience with discussions with DAOs, what are they, or do you see some strategies they employ to think about how should we set up this organization, especially if they now have almost endless possibilities once there will be all these modules?
Yeah, so great question. Often, I mean, I think the important thing is first is what is a DAO looking to do? I think that's the first thing when we have a client come to us and they say, we want to build this type of DAO. We say, okay, like, what are you trying to actually achieve? And let's be honest, be honest with yourself. What are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to exit early as a founder? Are you trying to create, reduce legal liability and risk on yourself? Are you trying to be like Lido and help secure Ethereum and be extremely resilient towards any type of capture, whether that be a nation state trying to capture you? Are you a small startup? So first of all, let's actually figure out what you're trying to achieve here, because most are not trying to just grow a community, right? So once you start to define these goals, then you can start to look at, okay, what type of governance might you want to use? And we do typically see people copying other methodologies that they think might be good for them. And this is challenging because, as I mentioned, there's actually not a lot, DAOs have not existed for a long time. So we need to look just beyond the DAO space. We need to look at governance as a whole. Now, I would say some popular ones that we see right now, DAOs that are a bit younger and less mature that are launching typically want to have checks and balances. So give their token holders the right veto, for example, but still allow the core team to function and operate quite quickly. You know, a DAO, a very decentralized DAO on the social layer, and it's important we extrapolate the two. There's a technological layer, which is typically what Aragon works on, and then there's this social layer, right? You can have a DAO with a small community, a very small community that's completely on-chain. That's totally, totally fine, right? But if you're a new business trying to build a product, you might not want tens of thousands of voters voting on what your next feature is, for example. Or maybe you do. Maybe that's how you want to build your product, right? But let's say you don't. You want to move fast, scrappy, build your product. Well, that's when you can have a DAO where you have optimistic dual governance. Your team is able to focus, work. Maybe you want to have still some community engagement on off-chain, in your forum, but then you give them the hard power. They can veto a malicious protocol upgrade, or sending more than 50%. You can customize these parameters, sending more than 50% of the treasury out at one time. You can really start to, with this technology, start to actually create custom parameters using our permission management system to decide okay, how are they able to interact, right? So I'd say typically they look at previous models, and the good thing about this is let's get some new models out there, let's play around with them, let's test them and see if they stick, and see if other organizations can then, for free, just take those models, plug it into their DAO and start to move forward. But not easy. Do you have a follow-up question?
Maybe an additional comment about the previous models, because I would also argue, or I hope that DAOs in the future will also look not only at previous DAOs, but also maybe at traditional organizations, because organizational science has a long tradition for several decades, if not centuries, and I think many things can also be learned there. And then trying to do this in a more decentralized way could also benefit DAOs. Sure,
yeah. We have a lot to learn from, we have thousands of years of data and history of governance, and there's no reason why we can't learn from that. I think you have to look at what do on-chain components, and this is where it gets confusing. We want to focus on being on-chain, because that's the whole point of this technology. What does it unveil, or what does it support? If you're moving off-chain, then I think you can really start to focus more on traditional methodologies if you want, because, what are you here for? For having these on-chain components allow for certain things, right? And they allow for your token holders to have the hard power. It allows for you to be resilient. These are the types of things that I really think, from an on-chain perspective, create the most value. And whether it's off-chain or on-chain, you as an organization need to decide how that fits into you reaching your goal. I think too many people want to decentralize without thinking about what am I actually trying to achieve here? And that's really important. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you for your presentation. So I also think that DAO is the future, and we have not thousands of years of data, maybe 700 because of Switzerland, with for me the only DAO, working DAO. My question is about your business model, for example, between Aragon X and Deep DAO. So we absolutely need grid tools. Governance is crucial for really decentralization, to achieve decentralization. So between the beginning with a startup, centralized, we need agility, but with the time we need security and also decentralization. So what's your business model? So what's the cost? I'm funding a DAO, so what would be my cost, or the cost of the members?
Yeah, so the question was what is our business model? I guess, how are we making money? We don't charge right now, and we haven't. So basically you can spin up your DAO, the only cost will be gas. So on Ethereum mainnet, that could be anywhere between $100 and $400. It really depends on gas prices, maybe even cheaper. On an L2, it can be cents, actually. We don't charge. Where we generate revenue in our business model is we build custom DAOs for clients currently. So if I won't say any names, if a big DAO wants to create some complex governance structure and they don't want their developers to build it, typically, most DAOs, their developers build their product, then have to also build their DAO at the same time, and this obviously is not great for actually creating your own product. We're experts at building DAO tooling. We will build it for them. They pay us. Sometimes that includes we help with governance ideation, finding delegates if they want a delegate program. So that's sort of how we generate revenue. There are other ways we sometimes can get within the platform. So there's a great front end where your DAO can manage itself. It can put up proposals. It can manage its treasury. We can also scrape fees, not off of the user. We never charge the user. Off of, let's say, if you want to connect to Uniswap, and you trade with Uniswap directly from your DAO or CowSwap, well, we can maybe scrape a fee off of from them. So we try and generate revenue from different methodologies that don't impact the user itself. Obviously, we're completely open source technology, so it can it can be forked quite easily. If we started just tapping and charging people for launching their DAO, it could be forked, for example. But our ethos, anyways, is to try and democratize this technology.
Okay, thank you.
No worries.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have another question. I just wanted to say that, yes, one moment, please. I just wanted to say that our next speaker, Frisco de Anconia, unfortunately will not be here. So we do actually have more time for questions. So if that's
Sure.
okay with you, Anthony.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no worries.
Please.
Great presentation, Anthony, and impressive what you guys are building.
Thanks.
The modularity aspect is great in terms of the initial design and also the ability to adapt over time. The question I had is around security, safety, and also how do you actually transition from one module to another? Is that programmatic, is that vote-based, or is that manual? How does that work from a transition standpoint, and how do you make sure it's safe?
Yeah, so great question. So basically the way to transition this change is actually to put up a governance vote, which is really, really cool. So you actually create a proposal. Now, you probably need some developer support there, to be honest, but you create a proposal to actually, and within the payload is the change, which allows you to actually uninstall one plugin and install a new plugin. So it's quite secure in that sense. I think as long as the plugin that you are using is obviously really well built. Obviously, plugins, if you're building your own plugin, you have to create your own custom logic. You need to have it audited, so make sure it's audited, and we help with all these types of things. But the process itself is quite seamless in that regard, and is much more secure than other methodologies of trying to change your governance. I can't remember the DAO, but about 4 or 5 years ago, a DAO tried to somewhat change its governance, and it forgot to deinstall a permission that it had, and that actually left a huge vulnerability, and it was drained by a white hat hacker, actually, luckily. So this actually is a very clean system, right? That's why modularity can be so beneficial. It's a very clean system which allows for this transaction, which is very clear cut. And I think it auto uninstalls the permissions for you to make this actually, so it takes care of that automatically, our system, which is super good. Another thing for security is because you have your plugins and the DAO contracts don't change, for example, we actually can propose security upgrades for your DAO. We can never touch your DAO. The minute your DAO launches, it is completely autonomous. We never have access to that DAO. However, what we can do is we can propose a security upgrade, and your DAO then can decide, and it's actually really cleanly put in the UI. If you use our UI, you can click put to proposal, basically, and it will auto-create a proposal with that payload for your voters to vote if they want to upgrade the DAO contract. So it's actually immutable if you want it to be immutable to some degree. You don't have to accept these upgrades. You can leave your DAO on V1 forever, or you can actually accept Aragon to propose you upgrades and trust us to have the highest level of security for you. So we keep it optional. Your DAO, your rules, we like to say. My pleasure.
Do we have any other questions? Right here.
Hey, great presentation. When the concept of a DAO and maybe Aragon was founded, crypto market cap was maybe measured in billions, maybe hundreds of billions.
Yeah.
Now we're at 2.5 trillion and growing.
Yeah.
How do you see the role of DAOs and Aragon evolving accordingly?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, that's a really good question. We definitely have seen quite a few changes. So the first Aragon stack, the first Aragon stack was the first DAO framework ever created. So for the first time, a DAO didn't need to just create itself, for example, and all custom code and logic. They could go into Aragon and use a framework that was already created for them. And those DAOs back then, to me, are still the OG truest DAOs. Actually, they're the ones where the protocol is actually governed by the token holders and the DAO itself. Think Lido, Decentraland, NFTX, Sarcophagus, these types of older DAOs. Actually, since then, we've seen a reversion, in my personal opinion, a reversion where a lot of DAOs, their protocols are no longer governed by token holders. So you've had a move, and this I think primarily came due to the bull market in 2021, where gas costs became so high to actually vote and manage on a layer one, on the Ethereum mainnet, that DAOs started moving to off-chain voting. And so sadly, what you've seen is a huge reversion where most DAOs now are not DAOs, they're community votes completely off-chain, no verifiability whatsoever, and then a group of trusted stakeholders go and actually execute on, or not, on what the community decide to vote on. And these are some of the biggest DAOs in the space. Arbitrum, for example, which has a wonderful community. The only thing the DAO controls in Arbitrum is the token contract and some of the ARB token itself. The same goes for Optimism, for example. The token holders do not govern the protocol itself. And so I would say we've seen quite a large reversion from the original concept and the original DAOs created, which I guess to some degree is sort of sad, but that's the market dynamics. People didn't want to pay. They said, we're all going to move off chain and just trust people. So now, actually in the last year, maybe because because of the bear market, we've started to see a little bit more on-chain governance, which is really, really cool. More DAOs moving on-chain. Obviously now you can launch DAOs on layer 2s. So if you come on the Aragon website in 10 minutes, you can launch a DAO on Base, Polygon, Arbitrum. And so now the cost to vote is starting to decrease. So you're starting to see more on-chain governance. And then I showed you that multi-chain governance plugin where actually you can now have layer 2 voting costs with a layer 1 DAO. And actually you can add a paymaster in, you can start to extrapolate away the fees for your voters. So I'm actually quite bullish. I think in the next 3-4 years, we're actually going to come way back and we're going to start to see on-chain DAOs fully governing on-chain as we solve some of the issues that have created voter apathy. So yeah, does that answer your question? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anthony. We would have one last question. Is that all right with you?
Yeah, of course. No worries.
Hello. I'm actually using Aragon for my project.
Oh, sorry, could you speak up?
I'm saying I'm actually using your framework for my project.
How many projects are using our framework?
Yes.
Yeah, so, do you have another question? I see you.
Yeah, well, actually my question is, do you have like some, are you incubating project? Are you helping project to start up?
Yeah, so okay, so 2 questions there. How many DAOs are on Aragon? Second question, are we helping incubate DAOs? So the first answer is we have 2 tech stacks, the original from 2017-18 and the current version. The old version is more TVL, over 40 billion in TVL. There's probably like 10 major DAOs on it. The new stack, we've had over 7,500 DAOs launch on the new stack. Smaller, more scrappy DAOs, and that makes sense because it was a newer product. We wanted to make sure that newer, smaller DAOs, less at stake, were launching on it. Now we have we're into the hundreds of millions on TVL on that stack. So we're definitely in the thousands in terms of DAOs that have actually launched on Aragon, which is great. In terms of helping incubate, we don't help incubate currently by providing grants or money. We do provide a lot of support, so if you are really interested in getting support, just reach out and we're able to give you ideas. We have a great education portal that our team works on. It has tons of information on how to launch your DAO, how to run your DAO, how to manage your DAO. So we're always willing to help, of course, in that aspect. Cool, thanks.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you again to the whole audience.